Josh Alexander reveals he was supposed to be part of an AEW event as part of the Impact Wrestling AEW crossover. Plus, Impact Wrestling announces more matches for the Multiverse of Matches event next month. Ace Austin qualifies for Rebellion. Plus, we have the ratings for this week's episode of Impact Wrestling on Access TV. All this and more in today's Impact Wrestling news. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into today. So let's start off talking about this Josh Alexander story. Now, this is very, very interesting. Josh Alexander appeared on the latest List and Your Boy episode from Fightful's YouTube channel. And Josh Alexander spoke about AEW's working relationship with Impact Wrestling that we saw play out across Impact Wrestling and AEW television across 2021 and late 2022. Now, Josh Alexander captured the Impact World Championship from Christian Cage at Bound for Glory 2021 at the tail end of the Impact and AEW working relationship, which of course saw Kenny Omega make several appearances in Impact Wrestling in 2020 and 2021. Now, speaking to Sean Ross Sapp and Jimmy Van on the List and Your Boy, Alexander put over the working relationship between AEW and Impact and said he was potentially penciled in to go to AEW, but Christian was hurt and written off of television. He said, quote, "I thought it was cool. I was a huge fan of Kenny. Anybody who is a pro wrestler should be a huge fan of Kenny. What he's able to do in the ring can only highlight us by having matches with him and competing, even though we weren't winning or anything like that. The relationship, I thought it was good for what it was. I thought we could have gone over there and highlighted some of our guys, but that never materialized, which was disappointing. There was talk of me going pre-Bound for Glory and just being in the audience, like this is the guy challenging Christian at Bound for Glory, but I think Christian hurt his shoulder and was written off of television around that time." So there's a couple of really interesting points there. First of all, Josh Alexander was actually meant to appear on an AEW event, which would have been massive. I think also it speaks to a lot of this discussion recently about Christian Cage. If you want to look at it from an AEW perspective, Christian Cage only recently returned to action against Ethan Page, and then he was in the Face of the Revolution ladder match at AEW Revolution last Sunday. Prior to that, he hadn't really wrestled since late October. And everyone said, what is going on with Christian? And all the reports said, no, he's not hurt, don't worry about that, he's not hurt. Well, Josh Alexander has come on List and Your Boy and gone, no, he was hurt. So he was written off of television around that time, and I guess he kind of just worked through the pain barrier to drop the championship at Bound for Glory because that was the plan, and then Impact did their own thing. I think there's a couple of really interesting points through that too. Like, one, it would have been very good for Impact, obviously, to have some presence on a couple of AEW shows heading up to Bound for Glory. I mentioned this so many times in the videos that I did covering the AEW and Impact Wrestling working relationship throughout 2021, is it did feel somewhat lopsided in the sense that AEW had their presence on Impact Wrestling television. Tony Khan would have his, advertisements every single week, and he would speak about what was going to happen the following night on AEW Dynamite, because of course Impact was on Tuesdays then, and all that kind of stuff. And I said, why don't we get that on AEW television? I get there's a lot, and I understand that there's a lot going on AEW television because there's a big roster and all that kind of stuff, but why didn't we see any of that? Why didn't we see, make sure you tune in next week to Impact Wrestling on Access TV, or these are our AEW guys that are going to be on Impact next week, and you should watch this, or have, like Josh Alexander said, him being just in the audience and say, oh, by the way, this is going to be the guy that's facing Christian Cage for the Impact World Championship at Bound for Glory. You should buy that pay-per-view. We never saw that, and frankly, I'm not actually sure if the fact that Christian Cage was injured, does that really prevent Josh Alexander being in the crowd? Why can't he still be in the crowd for that? Even if Christian Cage is injured and he is written off television, why can't he just be sat in the crowd? Why can't they do a backstage segment? Why can't they do something? They should have probably done something. I think that, Christian Cage having a shoulder injury, which again does look legitimate because he was out, to me, that isn't a good enough of an excuse. And I think it's some of the other comments he made there where he goes, well, we weren't really winning, and that's been a thing that they've kind of played into storyline, is that, yeah, it was great having Kenny Omega on the program and, all that kind of stuff, and having the Good Brothers go over there, but how many times did Impact Wrestling stars actually, look good or get victories? And that's the problem, isn't it? You can talk about Forbidden Door stuff all the time, but eventually what it comes down to is winning and losing, and the promotion wants their guys to win. Now, Kenny Omega, I don't think that anyone I think the biggest frustration that a lot of people had is that there should have been an Impact Wrestling person to beat Kenny Omega, not Christian Cage. And I think that's valid. The amount of time they put into that storyline, the amount of people that Kenny Omega came in and beat, whether it was Rich Swann, whether it was Sami Callihan, whether it was anyone that Kenny Omega came in and defeated, eventually someone on the Impact Wrestling roster should have defeated him. That was the whole point of the storyline, right? Is that eventually someone from Impact defeats Kenny Omega for the championship, brings the belt back to Impact, and they're the star. Now, it kind of did happen with Josh Alexander and Christian Cage, but no disrespect to Christian Cage, but he's not Kenny Omega, and especially in 2021, now 2022. So frankly, I think there is maybe somewhat of a bit of a bad taste left in some of the people's mouths when they thought, oh, well, Kenny came in and beat everyone, then he kind of left. I understand that he was injured, and I understand that he was going through a lot when he was doing those tapings. We spoke about a story the other day where they had to cut an entire segment because Kenny could barely walk as he went down to the ring. I understand that. But as Josh Alexander mentions, they didn't win a lot of matches. And most important, and I think that could have been, people could have gone, okay, but that's the storyline. That could have certainly been negated if you had some Impact Wrestling guys go over to AEW that weren't the Good Brothers. And we just didn't see that. And I think that was disappointing. The best chance of that we saw is when Moose was in Daly's place for, what was it, Against All Odds, when he was defeated by Omega due to the interference and all that kind of stuff. And I think Sami Callihan showed up. That was the most we saw of it, and that was interesting stuff. So it's interesting to know what could have been and maybe what should have been, but certainly a nice, interesting tidbit by Josh Alexander there. Now, Multiverse of Matches, of course, is coming up in April 1st, and Impact Wrestling has announced another match for the Multiverse of Matches event. Deonna Purrazzo will host another Champ Challenge at Impact Wrestling's Multiverse of Matches event, putting her Ring of Honor Women's World Championship or her AAA Reina de Reinas title on the line, which she has been doing, of course, a lot recently. Impact announced during the week that Purrazzo will host another Champ Challenge at WrestleCon on Friday night. Since winning the Ring of Honor title from Roxy back in January, Purrazzo has wins over Santana Garrett, Miranda Elise, Lady Frost, and Chelsea Green, which of course came at Sacrifice this past Saturday. Impact's Multiverse of Matches event at WrestleCon will take place on Friday, April 1st at 9 p.m. Eastern Time from the Fairmont Hotel in Dallas, Texas. It will air live on Fight TV. Impact will then present a midnight show featuring the throwback style IPWF brand 2. I'm going to try and do a watch-along or a post-show for that. That weekend is just going to be insane because we've got Supercard of Honor is earlier on in the day. Then we've got Multiverse of Matches. Hall of Fame is that night and SmackDown too. Then, of course, that entire weekend you've got WrestleMania. So it's going to be a busy weekend. I'm going to do my best. I think that requires me to do a lot of planning. I think I can do it. I think I can do it. It's just going to be busy. Non-stop streaming, but that's why we do what we do, right? Because we're pro wrestling fans. We enjoy that kind of stuff. Ace Austin is officially part of the X Division Championship match at Rebellion. During this week's episode of Impact Wrestling on Access TV, Ace Austin earned a shot at the X Division title. Austin had defeated John Skyler and Crazy Steve on the show and will now face X Division champion Trey Miguel and a yet-to-be-determined competitor in a triple threat match for the X Division title at Impact Rebellion. Of course, Austin is a two-time X Division champion. He lost the title to Josh Alexander during last year's Rebellion event, which begun that big push for Josh Alexander. And then, of course, 1 year later, after winning the X Division Championship at that event, Josh Alexander is now going to be competing for the Impact World Championship. Now, as of right now, we don't know who that third one is going to be. I'm not even sure if that match has been taped. I don't think it has. I think that's the match that's going to be taped at the old ECW Arena in Philadelphia. So we don't have an update when it comes to that, but that match, Ace Austin, Trey Miguel, and a yet-to-be-determined opponent, that's very, very exciting. So I'm really interested in that. And like I said, I think that the X Division Championship, it's a chameleon championship, and it evolves and it changes and it shifts. It's a shapeshifter to the person that's holding it. If you've got an Ace Austin or Trey Miguel holding it, it's more leaning into sort of a cruiserweight championship kind of thing. But if you've got a Josh Alexander, it turns into an Intercontinental United States Championship, and both are just as valid. I think, if anything, that's why the X Division Championship is so great, to be honest with you. Now, I mentioned we have the ratings for Impact on Thursday as well. Doesn't look pretty, it must be said, for Impact Wrestling, because Thursday's taped post-sacrifice edition of Impact Wrestling drew just 94,000 viewers on Access TV, according to Nielsen via Showbuzz Daily. This is down over 28% from last week's 131,000 viewers for the Sacrifice Go Home episode. Thursday's Impact drew a 0.03 rating in the 18 to 49 key demographic. This is down 25% from last week's 0.04 key demo rating. Thursday's Impact did not rank in in the cable top 150. Last week's show ranked 141st in the key demo rating and 135th in viewership. Now, Thursday's Impact drew the lowest audience since December 30, which was actually a best of 2021 Part 2 episode. The key demo rating tied with other shows to be the third lowest of the year so far. Thursday's Impact viewership is down 28.24% from last week, while the key demo rating was down 25%. Impact's viewership for Thursday was down 34.7% from the same week in 2021, while the key demo rating was down 25% from that episode, which aired 1 year before, which of course was airing on a Tuesday, I believe. Now, the NBA game, of course, was the big ratings mover on Thursday on TNT, along with all of the other usual cable competition. And look, I can speak till I'm blue in the face about Impact Wrestling and the ratings. We know what they need to do to up their numbers. They need to move away from Access TV. They need to go live. They need to do something. I think the biggest concern out of this, because these numbers are just happening. These numbers are happening and they're not what they were a year ago. Like I said, I think there's a combination of many things. I think spoilers, obviously. I think Access TV, obviously. They're big problems. Obviously, as well, there are other ways to consume Impact Wrestling content, whether it's YouTube, whether it's, Impact Plus, whatever. I understand that too. But they'll still be concerned about that. Obviously, they will, because going into Sacrifice on a tape show, they did a decent number for what they've been doing recently, 131,000. And to drop so significantly, under 100,000, they lost nearly 40,000 viewers. Why? Is it something that they saw at Sacrifice? Is it because probably the NBA competition, frankly? But, I think I've said several times before is I really do think there are cable networks bigger than Access TV that would be very interested in having pro wrestling on their station. Why? Because despite the ratings being low, pro wrestling still draws nowadays, and Impact Wrestling is a very good product. I guess the security that they have on Access TV is that it's owned by Anthem, so they're never going to throw them off the air, all that kind of stuff. But you have to almost question their ambition. You have to weigh up security. We've always got this to fall back on, but that shouldn't stop them from searching for other things as well. Unless the distribution of Access TV gets bigger and better, they should always be looking at other stations, in my opinion. Whether or not they'll do that remains to be seen. Finally, some matches have been announced for next week's episode of Impact Wrestling on Access TV. 4 matches have been announced for the March 17 episode of Impact Wrestling. For the first time since December 2020, Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin will reform as the Motor City Machine Guns to face Chris Bay and Jay White of the Bullet Club. White defeated Shelley at Sacrifice, but refused to shake hands with his former mentor after their bout. They exchanged words on March 10, with White claiming to be a different man than when they met. Shelley said that this has his fingerprints all over professional wrestling, and Jay White would not exist if it wasn't for him. He added that he is never alone when he is at Impact, bringing out Chris Sabin to set up a tag team match for next week. Additionally, Gianna Perazzo once again will put both her titles on the line against Giselle Shaw and Lady Frost. The Virtuosa was tired of hearing Frost and Shaw bicker, so decided to face both of them at the same time, seemingly confident they won't threat either of her reigns. They won't, obviously, because she's defending the title at Multiverse of Matches. One of those situations where the upcoming match kind of gives an inclination as to what's going to happen in the match that's been taped already. Also booked for next week are singles matches between Rhino and Steve Macklin, and Josh Alexander versus Matt Taven, which should be a great main event for the show. Of course, the Walking Weapon was confronted by Honor No More at the start of the show this past Thursday and brawled with the faction after insulting Taven by saying Ring of Honor shut down because of his run as world champion there. Though he really wants to face Eddie Edwards, Alexander was booked by Scott D'Amore to face Taven first. So I think at the upcoming show at the old ECW arena, we might see Alexander versus Eddie Edwards as a big match there, but we'll have to wait and see when it comes to that one. But anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts on today's Impact Wrestling news stories in the comment section below. Be sure to like and subscribe to Wrestle News 365. As I mentioned, we've got a big month coming up when it comes to WrestleMania, Hall of Fame, AEW, Ring of Honor, and Impact Wrestling. So now's the best time to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll speak for you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.